Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the TechSideline Podcast as we record on Monday, September 20th, following Virginia Tech's tough loss to West Virginia on Saturday. On episode 192 of the TechSideline Podcast, we're going to go through the loss for Virginia Tech against West Virginia, the red zone struggles, the defense bouncing back, and what this loss means going forward for Virginia Tech. All that and more coming up on episode 192 of the TechSideline Podcast, which starts right now. This is episode 192 of the TechSideline Podcast, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. You can visit southeastrtc.com to donate and learn more today about one of the fastest growing and best wrestling programs in the country, trying to get Olympic hopefuls to Blacksburg. Again, southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. I'm Jake Lyman, your host. We want to welcome you in if you are listening on Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. If you are watching live on the YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and drop a question for Will and Chris in the chat below. We'll get those at the end of the show. Today, again, our usual crew: Will Stewart across the way, our founder and general manager. To my left, the lead analyst and columnist for TechSideline, Chris Coleman. Behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, and the man in the chair to my right today, Nick Brown, as always. Welcome you in here, episode 192 of the TechSideline Podcast. Virginia Tech losing to West Virginia on Saturday, first loss of the season. Will, I want to start with you. You had maybe a more fun weekend than everybody else here. What'd you do?
So I spent the weekend at the Bristol races. Got there Thursday night, camped, and went to the Xfinity race on Friday and the Cup race on Saturday. And if you haven't seen the finish to the Xfinity race in particular was outstanding. It wound up with two cars sliding across the finish line at the end. It was awesome. So wound up in a suite. Buddy of mine works for PNC Bank, so he got some nice suite passes. Wound up in a suite with Mike Helton, I believe is his name. President of NASCAR. Can you check that, Nick?
I'm pretty sure Mike Helton's there. At least he used to be the president of NASCAR.
Yeah, if you Google president of NASCAR, you get a different name, but then if you look Mike up, it says he's president. So anyway, so he was in the booth I was in, and he's got a couple of brothers that went to Virginia Tech and graduated in 82 and 84. And he's very self-deprecating. He's like, I wasn't smart enough to go to Tech, and I think he did okay in his career. What do you think?
I was in the NASCAR offices one time in Charlotte getting a tour of them. We go all the way up to the top floor, and my friend who worked for NASCAR was like, oh, there's the NASCAR president's office right there. So I guess that was Mike Helton's office.
Yeah. He's an introvert. Nice guy, but an introvert. The race starts, and I know he's got race responsibilities, but he opens up his laptop, and he looks at his laptop the whole race, and isn't a really super chatty guy, not in that kind of setting anyway. Let's see. Also wound up on an elevator with Kyle Petty. Got to meet Kyle Petty briefly. So, to bring this back around to Virginia Tech football, let's see, of course, the first time I ever went to Bristol Motor Speedway was the 2016 game against Tennessee. And then I went back last year for the spring or fall race. I honestly don't remember. COVID was a thing, and there was hardly anybody there. So my buddy Jeff and I watched that race. And I didn't notice this the last time, but I noticed this past weekend when I was there. They very much embrace the football game as part of the history of the Speedway.
Wow.
So talking about being on the elevator with Kyle Petty, when the elevator doors close, there's a picture of the football game. It's a portrait picture that shows Tech and Tennessee on the field. And like, most football stadiums have that ring of honor or whatever. Well, BMS has the same thing, only what they commemorate as big moments in Speedway history. And the most recent one they've put up is they added Colossus in 2016, the huge video board. And then right next to that is college football's biggest ever Virginia Tech versus Tennessee back in 2016. So it's very much part of the history of Bristol Motor Speedway. And BMS does a fantastic job of of commemorating their history. I love walking up down the halls where the suites are, and they got some of the most amazing pictures of past races and stuff like that. So again, to bring it back around to football, once the Cup fans really started coming in on Saturday, the internet went away. So I did get to watch the game. There was a guy tailgating right next to us with Dish Network, so I got to watch the game. But as far as being able to get on Twitter or anything like that, that disappeared right around halftime Saturday and didn't come back till Sunday morning when everybody left the campground. So that was my weekend. Some of it Virginia Tech relevant, some of it not.
Well, it may have been better to be able to watch the game and not get on Twitter with the way things went. Virginia Tech storming all the way back, was down 27-14 late in that one. Hokies seemed to be out of it.
It was 27-7.
Well, it was 27-7.
Really late in the third.
27-14 with, I want to say, 5 minutes left in the game, and Virginia Tech comes all the way back. Jermaine Waller, a huge interception, set up the Hokies with a chance to win it. Could not come through, and that leads us to where the story of the game really was. Red zone struggles. Yeah. Virginia Tech had 3 trips inside the 10 and left with 0 points all 3 times. And the blame has been placed on the play calling, which we've seen in some of those plays. But Chris, I want to ask you, where did the Hokies really go wrong on those 3 trips?
I can count on one hand the number of people who, in my opinion, are actually qualified to talk about play calling, and I'm not one of them.
Yep.
So I'm not going to talk about play calling, other than to say I thought the third down play call was really good.
The throwback?
What was going to be a throwback, but somebody blew a block, and it forced Burmeister to spin.
Sorry, Lucita Smith, I have to say it was you.
Oh, I don't know that was.
Well, it depends upon responsibility.
He came between Lucita Smith and Luke Tenuta, and sometimes those rollout/throwback plays, you let the end man free because he shouldn't be able to get there in time before the play develops.
Yep.
So that could have been either one.
Yeah.
But it was one of them, for sure. But that was a well-designed play, and Trey Turner came wide open. But he came open when Burmeister was spinning to avoid the defensive lineman. Yeah. And by the time he got fully spun and got his eyes back upfield and readjusted, the window had closed.
And there were a number of plays like that, not just at the goal line, but where something was developing in the passing game, but Burmeister didn't have time.
You're right. Generally speaking, Virginia Tech's offense, before they got to the red zone, improved tremendously in this game.
Yep.
West Virginia, I don't think Tech fans respect West Virginia's defense, probably because West Virginia's in the Big 12 and they're not thought of as a defensive powerhouse. Last year, West Virginia finished 4th in the country in total defense. At home, they finished 1st in total defense. They went undefeated at home last year. They only allowed 228 yards per game at home last year, and they only allowed 12 points per game.
Those are incredible numbers.
Those are elite numbers.
Yes. Those are Bud Foster 1995 numbers.
So Tech scored 21 on them, and they put up 320 some yards, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like not double, but way better than what everybody did against them last year, including TCU. I think they beat Kansas State, who was ranked 16th at the time, by 27. Mm-hmm. And K-State only scored 10 points. That's a really good defense at home. So Tech improved, generally speaking, until they got to the red zone. But the red zone issues were an issue for Tech the first 2 games also. Like, they had to really struggle to get that second touchdown against North Carolina. If you recall, they threw the deep ball to Trey Turner down the sideline that was completed, and then after that, things just kind of stagnated, and it took an amazing throw and an amazing catch to Mitchell to make that. But again, that's an area of the field where you miss James Mitchell. I think losing Mitchell, and we'll get into this, but Burmeister apparently not being allowed to keep the ball on the read option this year, which actually means it's not even a read option at all. It's just a regular handoff disguised as a read option. That takes away 2 of your best options in the red zone.
Well, and that was where I wanted to go. The play that's being called out a lot is the jet sweep on 3rd down the second time the Hokies were in the red zone. So that was when they were trying to go in to make it 27-21 at that point late in the game. and jet sweep to Trey Turner.
And then
that was 3rd and 6, 3rd and goal.
From the 6,
and it was into the boundary. And another subtlety I noticed about that one of the lead blockers out front was Raheem Blackshear. Not to criticize Blackshear, he's not exactly a big guy, and WVU had just piled up on it.
Right.
Well, and it just seemed like West Virginia had already overloaded to the short side of the field. There was nowhere to go with the football. So you believe that Burmeister just didn't have the ability to pull it, because if that was a read and he could have made that play, it could have been a touchdown.
He hasn't kept on a read option all year.
That's true.
And this is a guy who kept on a lot of read options last year. Was very comfortable running
Very
read
good
option.
at it. Yeah.
So a 5th-year senior just doesn't inexplicably forget how to run the read option. Right? That's something he's been doing his whole life, not just at Virginia Tech, but at Oregon and high school. And everything.
Very, very early in this game, he did put the football in the belly of a running back and then bootleg around the end. That could have been designed. I don't know if it's a read option or not. I'm not arguing with you. Right. He's definitely not keeping the ball.
Yeah. He kept it on the touchdown against UNC, but I went back and watched that play this morning, and I don't think – he kept the ball in Holston's belly and then ran it in himself. But Holston had his arms out here like he was never expecting the handoff at all. So I actually think that was a busted play. And he just pulled it out and had nothing else to do, so he ran it in, and there happened to be a hole there.
Right.
So, yeah, they're protecting what a lot of people are starting to believe. Me, Riley Hokie, if you're an old school TechSideline subscriber, you remember him. Even French from the Key Play said it on Twitter this weekend. They're protecting what appears to be an injured throwing shoulder. Otherwise, there's no reason for him to be keeping the ball pretty much every single time.
For him to be handing it off.
Excuse me. Yeah. I mean, especially when that's one of his strengths. As a coach, you don't tell a player, "No, you're really good at this, so we don't want you to do it." Yeah. Right, so they're definitely protecting.
Something's up there.
Something is definitely up.
So there was a message board discussion this morning about the windmilling of the arm. Mm-hmm. He's always doing this with his arm, and so people are saying they've seen him do it all season. Mm-hmm. I've mainly seen him do it with the. I'm not sure I've ever seen the left arm.
I've only seen the right arm myself, but
and other people are like, no, I've seen him do it with both arms. So something. Either we're all making this up in our heads, or something's going on.
Well,
there.
it's just it's not necessarily the windmilling. That's when I first started thinking about it. But it's the fact that he's not keeping it on read options, and he's a guy who would absolutely.
And that's a weapon. That's a
total
weapon.
Right. And you would not do that for any other reason unless he was injured or somehow, because that was a major weapon. For them last year when he was on the field, and he's such a good runner. I mean, he's one of the best running quarterbacks Tech has ever had.
Yeah,
there's no. It's like, I mean, that 3rd and 24 was like Tyrod on 3rd and 31, man, and it's like you wouldn't tell Tyrod Taylor to never keep the ball.
There's still a jock sitting on the field, I believe.
Yes,
right. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of the thought there, is that he's not pulling it on the read option, but on that scramble on 3rd and long, he lays out to get to the sticks there. Mm-hmm. It seems like if they're protecting him, maybe they're not doing a very good job of it.
Scrambles are what they are. Once you get going, you're going to take a hit to a certain extent, and you've got to lay out there and try to get the first down. I mean, you've already run 22 yards. You might as well dive and get 2 more. But they want to limit it as much as possible is what it seems like. I think maybe they probably should have taken the shackles off there at the end with the game on the line. Because, it's West Virginia is a very disciplined football team. Very, very disciplined defensive
in their assignments.
They attack. It seemed like it's really they were really difficult to fool. Tech did some things as far as pulling offensive linemen on passing plays, and one of the reasons you do that is because linebackers are taught to read the first step.
So yeah, let me jump, because I brought this up on the message board.
Yes.
and learned something. So I watched a play where it was a pass play. Mm-hmm. Virginia Tech's offensive line crashed to the left, and Lacita Smith rolled from his left guard position out to the end. And the problem is at number 12 for WVU, he wasn't. You pointed out in that message board thread, sometimes you do that. It looks like a running play, and you're trying to get the linebackers to commit to the run.
I'll say, all right, I spent part of a season playing an inside linebacker role in high school, and really the only thing I remember about it was I think everybody assumes you're a linebacker. You're sitting there watching, where's the running back go? That's where I'm going. No, as a linebacker, a lot of times you're taught to read the first step of the offensive guard is your play key to whether it's a run or a pass. Yeah. So when you see an offensive guard take that first step like he's going to pull, you're supposed to assume it's going to be a run play, and you attack the gap like a run. And a lot of times that can leave open spaces over the middle of the field. So that's why you see some teams do that. They pull their offensive guard in a passing situation to throw off the reads of the linebackers and slow them down.
But number 12, not that he's a linebacker, he's defensive. He was coming all the way.
Nobody on West Virginia bid on that. Like I say, they're an exceptionally disciplined defense. Yeah. So a lot of the deception that Tech normally runs on offense did not work against them.
Yeah. My only criticism of West Virginia's defense was if you go back and you look at the Blackshear touchdown and in particular the Holston touchdown, that was some terrible tackling.
It sure was.
It was.
You know. Other than that, I thought they played a good game and they tackled well early, which set the tone. Right. And so that's something I wanted to kind of get off my chest early in the podcast is, you know, the way games start is so important, and everybody's like, oh, Tech wasn't ready to play. What I saw was in the first 5 plays, West Virginia went deep twice. The very first play of the game, it was incomplete. He was open.
Yeah, he was.
Boy, was he open. And then they went deep on the 5th play for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. Deep was, I think, 35 yards. You know?
Well, it was in the end zone, so that was as deep as they could go, right?
Right, exactly. So in those 5 plays, they stretched the defense. And if you go back and you look at Virginia Tech's early play calling, it's jet sweeps and not even middle screens or tunnel screens, but screens out to the side. All this lateral stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I personally, you know, I don't know the philosophy behind it. I don't know what the offensive game plan is, what they're doing. I personally have disliked that kind of stuff for almost 30 years. And here's what it goes back to. 1992, when Tech was not good that year. I don't remember who they're playing, but they're trying to break in Maurice DeShazo. That's his first time playing, you know. And I remember one game in particular where the offense was just weak. It was all this dinky stuff running laterally. And this is 30 years ago when it was all about power football up the middle. They were having Maurice throw safe passes over here, and it was driving me nuts. And then he twisted an ankle or something, had to leave the game. They bring in Treg Cole, backup quarterback, like 6'4", big, huge dude. Very first play, bomb down the middle. Now, it's incomplete, but I remember the fans in the stands just the sarcastic applause because they finally attacked deep down the field. So
Well, you know, Maurice didn't have much of an arm, right?
Oh, I know. It's just and they're not showing much of an arm with Burmeister either. So it's a lot of this lateral stuff trying to fool you, and WVU's coming in and slashing and making tackles and getting excited. So that sets the tone early of we're going to try to fool you, whereas WVU is like, we're coming after you.
Well, and could that be something, if Burmeister is injured, that they don't feel comfortable taking as many shots downfield, that they want to give him those safe, easy passes?
I mean, it could be. I did a little research this morning on shoulder injuries, and I wasn't able to come up with anything about quarterback accuracy and things like that. It can't help. I mean, I remember when I sprained my AC joint, like, if you're watching the podcast, you'll be able to understand this, but if you're listening, you're not, and I apologize. But I couldn't raise my arm up to shoulder length if I had my arm pointed to the outside. But when I had my arm pointed straight ahead, I could raise it normally. Okay. So a lot of times when you have a shoulder injury, how much pain you're in is determined by arm angle and things like that. So
I got something going on like that right now. Right. Moving a refrigerator back in May. Yeah. I did something to my shoulder, and you're right. I cannot go back from here.
So you will change. You will naturally, as a human being, to avoid pain, you will slightly change your arm angle and motion just to avoid that pain, which does impact your accuracy.
Yeah.
So it's going to be there some plays, and it's going to be not be there other plays, just depending on the angle of the pass and everything. It's going to be kind of random, I think. So I do think that has something to do with it. I mean, we saw Burmeister in the preseason, and he was pushing the ball down the field fine. That was a point I made in the preseason, is he looked really good throwing the ball down the field.
Yeah.
Well, and the two plays back-to-back was that first red zone trip at the end of the first half, both to Tavion Robinson. One was low, one was high, but he was open both times. I think that was where we first kind of got a little glimpse of it. Okay, maybe
the low one was tipped.
It was,
the TV guy said that, and I watched it over and over, and
I thought I saw it tipped. I didn't have volume, so I just thought I saw it.
It looked like it may have been tipped, but I still think it would have been low even if it wasn't. It didn't look like a great pass either way.
I did not see the ball significantly change its trajectory, and it looked to me like it was still a spiral. So, but you're talking about two passes right down the middle. Maybe he's struggling with that sort of throw. But then again, the throw to Tavion that went for a touchdown was zing right down the middle, good throw.
So it seems like it's been inconsistent, which would be something that you're saying, that it could be that arm angle.
It did not,
on where it comes out.
He was very accurate when the two practices we saw him in the preseason. And he threw the ball downfield well. I mean, if there's something wrong with it, which they'll never say, by the way, because you just tell the other team, the quarterback's got an please take shots at him, right? Yeah. If it is injured, it most likely occurred during the UNC game. One of our subscribers noted on the board yesterday that at some point during the UNC game, he saw Tech's backup quarterbacks warming up on the sideline, and first half, he nailed Trey Turner on that deep ball down the sideline.
Yeah,
it was perfect.
That was a sweet throw.
Yeah, and so And then in the second half, of that game, Tech's offense just dropped off after moving up and down the field easily in the first half. I did some research on shoulder injuries this morning, and I think this is for NFL only. 81.5% of shoulder injuries occur during a game, and I imagine that number is higher in college because quarterbacks run the ball more in college. So I mean, if it is injured, it probably happened during the UNC game. Is what it sounds like to me. All the evidence points to that.
So we have no hard evidence, but we just have a lot of I don't want to say conspiracy theory type stuff, circumstantial supportive of this. Yeah.
Well, and it didn't make it any easier that Silas Janzy goes down and was seen with a walking boot on the sideline. Brock Hoffman eventually is moved over to right tackle, and you're also missing James Mitchell, who's a great blocking tight end.
That's my concern coming out of the game. I didn't learn anything else about Virginia Tech offensively in that game. I thought they were struggling in the red zone before, and they did again.
Yeah.
So I didn't really learn anything new there, except for, oh my gosh, with Silas Janzy out of the game. I mean, Tyrell Smith.
That's a big drop off.
I love Tyrell Smith. He's a great Hokie, but he's not as big, strong, quick as Silas Janzy over there. So that's a physical drop off. And Brock Hoffman, I don't think he's been great at center this year, but it's not fair to any center to ask them to go out to the edge and block quick defensive ends. It's just not that's not what they're built for. That's not how centers are built. So hopefully Janzy is okay. He was in a walking boot after the game. Please, my God, do not throw him out there against Richmond and let him re-injure it. Oh, my God. I mean, I will go nuts if they do that. You've got a great opportunity here. Again, I don't know the extent of the injury. For all I know, it's something horrible and it requires surgery and it's a moot point. But if it's a sprain or something like that, then you've got Richmond and then the bye week. Take advantage of it.
3 weeks between West Virginia and the Notre Dame game, so plenty of time for him to recover. Do you think that Hoffman at tackle is something they may work with this week, or do you think maybe they throw a younger guy at right tackle like Parker Clements?
I mean, I would start Tyrell Smith there.
Okay,
personally. Now you could throw Hoffman over there and make it a competition and see which one plays the best in practice. That would be an option. But Tyrell is not a physically dominant player over there, and I know he had a couple false start penalties too, but I think he's less likely to get your quarterback killed.
Yeah. So looking through the preliminary PFF grades, Pro Football Focus grades, there really is no task or unit on the offense that acquitted itself well. They've been grading out. So the way PFF works
Blackshear
is,
played a good game.
Yes. Well, I'm talking about like
Just pure grades.
the unit as a whole, not individual players.
Right.
So grades in the 60s and 70s are okay. 80s and 90s are really good.
60 is baseline.
Yeah.
Smack dab average.
So you get below a 60 and it gets kind of rough. And the offense as a whole is graded out in the 70s for the first two games, and they graded out as a 56 in this game.
Yeah.
And then when you go down run blocking, pass blocking, both in the 50s. The receivers got a grade of 60-something, but everything else is down in the 50s. So this was a really rough game for the offense relative to the first couple of games.
And the thing is, like, I think they improved for the most part considering the level of competition, but the level of competition is going to drive that grade down.
Yeah.
So much of your grade is dependent on the team you're playing, and that was just, Middle Tennessee I think is a well-coached team, but they're a Conference USA team in the end. North Carolina is a good team, not so good defensively.
They're a talented team,
They're
but just not.
They're not West Virginia tough on
If
defense.
you watch the North Carolina-Virginia game, their defense isn't great. But
It's that whole the sum. What is it? The whole is less than the sum of the parts.
Yes, and that's. I only remember two tough UNC defenses in my life. One in 97 and one in 2009. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah.
But I'm not really I'm not going to throw the towel in on the season. Ultimately, like Virginia Tech this year, they're 2-1. They are 1-0 in games in which they were favored, and they are 1-1 in games in which they were the underdog. They lost by 6 points on the road to a team that went unbeaten at home last year and had the number one home defense in the country.
Yeah.
That's not something in itself to be worried about. The worrisome thing to come out of the game is all the walking wounded.
Injuries are starting to pile up.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wish Tech could have played that last drive with James Mitchell on the field, with Silas Janzi on the field, and with Raheem Blackshear on the field. Blackshear, to me, it's like, who are your players who are like most likely to score a touchdown?
Yeah.
To me, he's one of them. He and Mitchell are certainly two of those.
Yeah.
So when you're in the red zone and you're without arguably your two guys who are most likely to score a touchdown, makes it a lot more difficult to score. Not that I think there was like great play calling, in particular the jet sweep to the boundary on third down. I don't have a problem with that call in general, but West Virginia is such a disciplined defense that they're unlikely to fall for something like that.
And there were on the last possession inside the 10, there were a couple of play calls that preceded the third down where they just ran up the middle.
Right.
But they had just run up the middle twice before that and picked up something like 13 to 15.
Well, you know what they were doing there. It's always that balancing act when you're about to score towards the end of games. Like, you don't want to leave West Virginia with 1:30 on the clock,
needing a field goal to win.
Right. With a quarterback who, for his career, has thrown for a lot of yards, and they've got a good group of wide receivers. So there's always that balancing. I think the first two play calls were about running clock, and if one of them happened to get in, you get in. I was watching the game with Riley Hokie, and I said to him, I was like, all right, we need to score, but we don't need to score too quick.
Oh, yeah.
I was saying that during the game, so I'm not going to criticize him for something that I would have done too.
Yeah.
And going back to the jet sweep, I want to say that I think the jet sweep call has gotten such a negative connotation under Brad Cornelsen. I don't think the jet sweep in general is a bad call.
It's not, yeah.
In that spot, it probably isn't the way. And I think Brad Cornelsen probably going back, when he watches it back, probably would say the same thing, that maybe that wasn't the right call.
Yeah, well, and his option down there is Trey Turner, and Trey's just not a physical guy. Like, you go back to one of the very early plays in the game, he got run down from behind, and the defensive lineman literally grabbed him with one hand on the jersey and tackled him with one hand.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
and so you'd like to have James Mitchell down there near the goal line, your most physical guy that can run that. Trey's not a real tackle breaker.
Yeah, he's not. Unless it was against UVA last year on the jet sweep on the goal line. But that's UVA defense. They just gave up 59. So, not quite West Virginia's defense. To me, it's not – I don't – in a vacuum, I don't think the jet sweep's a bad call. In fact, we ran a huge series of articles proving that it's a good call. Generally, it's a good play. I don't think it's necessarily a great call against West Virginia because of how disciplined their defense is. Yeah. Sometimes it's as much about your opponent as it is you.
Well, and before we take our break here, one of the conversations we had last week was about replacing James Mitchell, finding a playmaker. Standing out to me was Tavion Robinson. I thought he had a couple of big plays in that game, and maybe if that can continue, he can be that guy the Hokies can rely on for those chunk plays.
He appears to be Tech's best receiver. And my biggest issue with the whole offense is, they're 4-star receivers. Tavion and Trey were very, very good as freshmen, but the progression for both of them has been limited since then. They're both I think Tavion's improved a little bit more, but generally speaking, their improvement, their progression as players or development as players has not been as strong as the development of Virginia Tech's players at other positions. I mean, you look up and down the line at all these positions, and you see guys that have gotten a lot better since they were freshmen to the end of their careers. Yeah. And I don't think you can say the same for those guys.
We've talked about this on the podcast before.
And I think that's what holds Tech's offense back more than anything. My opinion on Cornelson is I've studied the efficiency stats and everything like that and been watching it for 5 years. I don't think he's a great offensive coordinator. I don't think he's a horrible one. I think he's made us better. I think he was a better offensive coordinator when his wide receivers coach, who is now the Alabama's wide receivers coach, was on the staff. And Tech's receivers were getting more separation and things like that. Trey got more separation when he was a freshman than he's doing now. I mean, his grade in the passing game on Saturday was, as a senior against West Virginia, when he should be at his peak, was like a 56.2. He's not beating defensive backs. He's not big enough.
But there are situations where I don't disagree with you, but there are situations where the receivers are getting open and Burmeister's not seeing them. And I talked in the message boards this morning about a play. I remember it was a 3rd and 5, and I think it was Tavion. West Virginia was in a zone. Tavion ran the 5 yards to the marker, turned around, and Burmeister just never saw him. I don't know what Burmeister's read on that is. I don't know, where's he looking, where's he supposed to be going. We don't know any of these things. It's not like the receivers are running open free everywhere, but there are times where they get open and they're not seen. So it's those two things working together.
Right. Well, and having James Mitchell on those red zone series, you feel like maybe they at least get in on one when you have a threat like that down there as well. So for Virginia Tech red zone struggles, that was the story on Saturday against West Virginia. We're going to take a break here on episode 192 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. When we come back, we're going to talk about Jermaine Waller getting his 3rd pick in 3 games and the biggest one yet to set up the Hokies with a chance to win it. We're going to look at where we stand with this Hokies team after their first loss of the season and how they can use the next 2 weeks to get ready for Notre Dame in Lane Stadium. Stay with us here on episode 192 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. We'll be right back. We welcome you back on episode 192 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, recapping Virginia Tech's loss to West Virginia back on Saturday. Jake Lyman, Will Stewart, Chris Coleman, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, and Nick Brown to our right. He's checking on your YouTube questions, so make sure you drop those in the chat for Will and Chris. He'll also have updates from Justin Fuente's weekly press conference, which starts in less than half an hour at 11:30. We've already gone through a lot of the negative stuff from Saturday's game, so I think it's time maybe to look at the positive. A lot of fight from the Hokies team. They were down, probably called out of it multiple times, and still found a way to get within 3 yards of winning that game. A lot of grit from the team, if you want to use what's on the front of the helmet.
Yeah, it was 20. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was 27-7 with 8 minutes to go, third quarter.
West Virginia kicked a field goal in their first drive of the third quarter.
They held the ball for about 6.5 minutes.
Oh, and at that point, I was like, man, we're only have the ball like 2 or 3 times this whole half.
And I was just thinking shades of, Pitt's blown Tech out a few times up in Pittsburgh and in the last few years, and it was looking pretty grim, And then I think after that, WV only had another like 50 yards of offense after that. Yeah.
They finished with 373, and 80 came on their second play from scrimmage.
They had 270 in the first half, and then they had about another 50 or 60 in that first possession of the second half, and then barely did anything after that.
Yeah.
Well, and you may have counted them out then, 27-7, starting to look bad. And then 27-14, and Virginia Tech turns it over on downs inside the 10 with, I want to say, 6-7 minutes to go. It seemed like they were out of it again and still found a way back into it.
Yeah. They were a calm team, I think. And if you're not calm in situations like that, you're not going to come back for sure. It was not an auspicious start by the defense. But they did obviously improve throughout the course of the game. There's 3 plays I'd like to have back defensively. Obviously, the 80-yard touchdown run. Yeah. And that was a situation where it looked like when West Virginia set their man in motion, like 2 Tech defenders went with it, which left a gap.
Can't be
open.
right.
Right. Which, I mean, and I think, I don't want whoever the guilty party was. I think it might have been Dax, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, Dax and the safety both went over. And then that only left Tisdale, and Tisdale went into the wrong gap.
Well, he went into his own gap in the back. And there was just there was just nobody there to cover the other gap. And generally speaking, when you see like an 80-yard touchdown run in football up the middle, it's not because like the offensive line just went up there and physically brutalized. It's because somebody just went in the wrong direction and just left a huge hole there.
It's funny though. You're right. I'm sure Tisdale was playing his assignment perfectly.
I'm sure he was.
It's not his job to cover
the other person.
The center just took Tisdale out of the play. I mean, that was.
And then let's see, the Chamari Connor tackle attempt on 3rd down.
Yeah.
Where he just tried to level the dude and the guy bounced off of it and picked up a first down. Just wrap the man up and bring him down.
Yeah.
Now at the same time, Chamari also forced a fumble later in the game by doing the exact
same technique.
Yeah, I know, but I still hate that. I hate it.
Well, we sit here and we talk about shoulder injuries and I don't know.
Yeah. And then the other one was there was a 3rd and 12 play where Nasir Peoples just didn't drop deep enough in his zone, and Daggy put it over his head on a little corner.
It was 3rd and 10, and that was a 30-yard completion. Tech rushed 3, put 8 back
he had
in
all
zone.
the time.
Right. And that was everything else was covered up, and there was no. That's something you learn as a defensive back through more experiences, certain down and distances. If there's nobody in front of you, then you keep backing up. You take away that passing window.
Yeah. So my other thing, talking about the defenses, and I didn't get a chance to listen to any of the post-game interviews, but Justin Hamilton doesn't do post-game interviews anyway, right?
No.
So I'm just wondering about rushing 3 and 4 guys against an immobile quarterback. If you had told me before the game that they were going to sack Burmeister 6 times and Tech was going to sack Daggy once, I'd have said, that's not right.
Right. And I do want to talk about this again, go back and talk about this. It wasn't all the offensive line and pass protection. I mean, Jalen Holston missed a bad one
gosh,
too.
That was bad.
That was rough. But whatever the cause of it, a quarterback with Burmeister's mobile ability doesn't need to be getting sacked 6 times.
He got a lot of it was just he just got swallowed up quickly.
Yeah.
Now there were some plays where the pass blocking was good, but they were just few and far between.
Let's see. David Cunningham sent us a text. He said, good podcast so far. I think Caleb Smith deserves a mention at receiver. And he's right. Caleb Smith does over.
Yes.
Caleb Smith is the receiver. Caleb Smith's gotten himself big and strong. So he's able to deal with more physical coverage. Trey's the same size as he was as a true freshman.
Well, that WVU defensive back was grabbing him on that one play.
And he still made the catch.
Right.
Exactly. So, you've got to hit the weight room hard at this level to get the most out of your ability.
Yeah.
And, I think if Trey was 200 pounds instead of 190, he'd be a better football player. But,
and there was another one, everybody's like, we didn't throw in the middle of the field at all. Yeah, they did early on. Smith, across the middle for about a 10 to 14-yard gain. And he's a big enough guy that nobody likes going across the middle. But he's a big enough guy that he can do it.
Well, on 3rd downs, it seemed like Caleb Smith was the go-to guy,
and
which you may not have expected. Yeah, 4th down as well.
That's right.
Yeah, so, he had a good game.
He did. Looking back at defense, the big play for the Hokies obviously was Jermaine Waller intercepting the play on 3rd down.
3 for 3.
And they weren't just like, here's an interception, the quarterback misread the coverage or it got tipped. I mean, those were 3 elite level interceptions by Jermaine Waller. I'm sad that this one was wasted.
Yeah.
But what a play.
It was unbelievable, and
By the way, did you catch at the end of that play? That WVU guy blasted him out of
nailed him.
nowhere.
He got annihilated.
Yeah, you never saw him coming. It's a good thing he held on to the ball.
Yeah.
Well, what does it matter?
Well, if Jermaine Waller wasn't already, it seems like he's putting himself in maybe first-round draft pick contention like Caleb Farley last year. Yeah. I mean, 3 picks in 3 games, and it's not like these have been just sitting right at him. He's making plays every single game. So
I don't think, as much as we complain about our offensive coordinator, I don't think on 3rd and long at the end of the game when you're trying to pick up a first down, you want to throw the ball anywhere in Jermaine Waller's general direction.
They should not. You can argue they shouldn't have been throwing the football at all.
I mean, well, it's back. Gosh, you see coordinators do things a lot that I'm like, what? I remember back in 2019 when UNC just kept throwing at Caleb Farley.
Right,
in the first
I remember
half.
that.
And I'm like, what are you doing? Are you really that well coached?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I don't know. I think everybody can complain about their offensive coordinator to a certain extent.
Right. It's a bad play call if it doesn't work.
Right.
It's true. And looking at Virginia Tech's defensive coordinator, maybe didn't look as good in the first half. And we mentioned last week that Tech had pretty much been mistake-free. There wasn't a whole lot of issues on either side of the ball. That didn't last in the first half of this game. Obviously in a 14-0 hole early, but Justin Hamilton's group really made good halftime adjustments and seemed to be much better.
Yeah, I think I'm not an X's and O's guy, but I think maybe he probably made some kind of adjustment there, maybe. But I just think for the most part they started playing better. I think that's part of it too. You don't like the way they started the game, but over 4 quarters of football they allowed 373 yards, which would have ranked 34th in the country last year in road defense. CFBstats.com is awesome because you can sort on home and road and against Power 5 teams and everything like that. So 373 yards in 2019, excuse me. I'm not counting last year because last year there weren't home crowds and things like that, so it's hard to judge. But in 2019, that would have ranked 34th in the country in total defense on the road. And they forced 2 turnovers, and only 12 teams in the country averaged 2 forced turnovers per game on the road in 2019. As a comparison, the LSU defense in 2019 gave up 425 yards per game on the road and only forced 1.5 turnovers per game on the road. And they won the national championship. Tech's defense on the road on Saturday was better statistically in every single category than LSU's was on the road when the year they won the national championship. So you'd like to have a better start, obviously, and a couple of those plays back. But on the whole, in college football these days, that's a above average performance on the road. That's a solid road performance.
And how lucky was WVU? They fumbled 3 times, only lost 1 of them.
Yeah.
And could have and should have lost a couple others.
That's one of those random event things that I talked about in my article. There's some things in football games that you can't control. And Tech, honestly, against UNC might have got away with a couple of random events with, the original call on the field is called an interception, and you can't overturn it. There's not enough video evidence. If you'd call the Chamori Connor interception incomplete, then maybe you can't overturn that either, and UNC keeps the ball.
Or Tavion Robinson's end zone.
That's where I'm getting at. That's the same thing. I think if they had ruled that pass complete, I don't think there would have been enough video evidence to overturn it. And there's an extra touchdown for Tech and a 6-point loss. And I think that's where the field turf there at West Virginia throws off the ref. And I don't know how many people have ever walked on a turf field before, but if you go to Virginia Tech Fan Day next year in the indoor practice facility, pay attention to the field in there. It's field turf, and in field turf there's these little pellets,
these little black pellets.
You see it at like Tampa Bay in baseball when somebody gets a base hit to the outfield. You see them fly up. And I think what happened on that play is Tavion's gloves, his hands, made those pellets fly up, which made the ref think the ball had hit the ground, and he called it incomplete.
Yeah.
And that was my initial thought watching it, too. I saw the pellets fly up, and I said, that one bounced in. He trapped it.
Right.
Yeah.
But looking at the replay, it looked like he got the hands under.
I thought he did. I mean, I don't know for a fact either way. So, I'm not angry at the ref for getting the call possibly wrong because the pellet thing throws it off. But I'm just giving an example of a random event during a game that could go either way.
So random event during a game. Was it Garbett that came in and knocked the ball out of Daigie's hands? bounce. Tisdale picks it up. Tisdale picked it up, right?
Yeah.
And there's 2 WVU players right there. Yeah. How often do you see that play where a linebacker catches it off the bounce and there's nobody in front of it?
Yep. Open lane to the end zone.
Yeah.
Looking at the defense, 6 halves of football so far for Justin Hamilton this season. In that first half against West Virginia, he gave up 24 points. The other 5 combined, he's given up 27, and 7 of those was on a garbage time touchdown against Middle Tennessee. So
with the backups,
you would have to feel pretty good about where this defense is heading. You just got to make sure you don't get into a 14-0 hole like you did against West Virginia.
Yeah. I mean, that's the most important thing, I think.
I think he's acquitted himself well so far.
He's done fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it hard to imagine that, like, for whatever money Tech has to spend on coordinators and coaches, that they could have gone outside the program and found somebody who would have done a better job.
Well, I think that's fair.
I mean, I think he's done a good job. I mean, he's shown the ability that he can come up with a unique scheme. Now, some of it, you have to have the right matchups to be able to do this, but he was able to come up with a unique scheme to beat UNC. And, he was able to make in-game adjustments against West Virginia. And that's what you want out of your defensive coordinator.
I would ask him one question, though. What's up with the Amari Barno situation? How can you get him productive again?
Right.
2 straight games without even an assist.
Right.
0 tackles for 2 straight games. You just don't see that. And this is a guy who's playing 40 or 50 snaps a game.
Right.
So that's kind of baffling and what's up there.
Well, and especially coming off a game we had 3.5 tackles for loss against North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was like ACC Player of the Week by most people that pick those things.
It could be one of 2 things. It could be he's just not playing well, or he could be hurt and is playing through an injury. So I don't want to say I hope he's hurt because I hope he's not.
I hope he's hurt and he gets healthy today.
Right.
So I didn't watch him much, but there were a few plays where I watched him and he just got swallowed up by the tackle. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't look like to me that he's playing as strong as he did last year. Like last year, he actually surprised me because I thought he played stronger at the point of attack than I expected him to.
Same here.
But he doesn't seem to be doing that this year. So. And despite the fact that he added 10 pounds.
Yeah, and there were a couple of times where he almost made a play, like he was coming at Daggy like a freight train on one play in particular that I remember where he looped around and came down the middle but didn't get there on time. So,
all right, well, I want to look big picture here. After a lot of NFL games, they'll say it's overreaction Monday. I felt like that was yesterday. You look through Twitter, it was overreaction Sunday.
I get to take this one.
Virginia Tech is 2-1 with a close loss on the road against a Power 5 team, 1-0 in ACC play. Is this still a team that everybody should feel good about and not overreact to one loss?
So I can probably talk about that for a while. They missed an opportunity to change the narrative. There are several things that have popped up before. In isolation, no, not a big deal. Let's see what happens from here. But there are several things that have popped up before. The whole concept of not being ready to play, and that's an affliction that strikes a lot of college football teams. It is a little baffling to me that you're in a packed house with a ton of energy, and at the beginning of the game, West Virginia's coming at you, and you look like you're not ready for it. But I talked about that earlier. Justin Fuente has this talent or it seems to happen to him. He makes decisions in game that I don't think appear to be bad decisions. I'm kind of if I was a coach, I'd be kind of aggressive with the 4th down thing. In isolation, I don't question his decision to go for it after that jet sweep to the boundary. He went for it on 4th and goal from out there, and Tech didn't pick it up. But at the end of the game, they wind up being the wrong decisions. Assuming your field goal kicker can make it, which is a whole nother discussion, if you do kick that field goal, then later you only have to kick a field goal. So when you add it up at the end, calling the timeout when Liberty's getting a field goal block, these things that like in isolation, they don't look like bad decisions, but they just bite him in the butt. They just
turn out to be.
And so that criticism keeps happening. Oh, he makes these terrible in-game decisions. Well, not really.
It's a good decision if it works.
So far, they're just adding up wrong.
I mean, I would have gone for it on 4th and 1. I would now my issue isn't the decision itself, or even necessarily the play call itself, but like if you do have a quarterback with an injured shoulder, you probably don't want to run him in a power behind Tyrell Smith.
I'm one of those.
You put in Bloomrick and you run it behind your two best run blockers. So that's
I'm one of those football observers that cannot stand on 4th and 1 when you're in the shotgun and you got to run 6 yards to pick up 1. And I know that's how football is. Are you telling me you can't get that guy under center? You can't get somebody under center and do it old school like ever?
Well, they don't practice under center snaps anymore.
I don't care.
Think of it. You're a college coach. Maybe you want to run more under center stuff. You're evaluating all your quarterbacks from film, which one you're going to offer, and all of a sudden you're looking at all their tape, and like not one of them has ever taken an under center snap before.
But you can argue. You can argue that there ought to be 5 minutes of practice where you pull Connor Blumrick aside and you practice him under center taking snaps.
Yes.
So here's the thing. I know why coaches do it. They're like, we never run out of under center. We don't want to make a mistake. Well, I tell you what, Coach, on 4th and 1, if you line up with Connor Blumrick under center and he fumbles the snap, I promise I won't criticize that. I promise. But the whole we got to run 6 yards to pick up 1 and our quarterback weighs 205 pounds who's doing it, it's
well, in a lot of those situations, it's short yardage, 4th down. We saw the Hokies in those a couple of times, and usually it's like the 2-point conversion. You have your best play for that one because you need to score or get the first down. It didn't seem like those were the Hokies' best plays that they put out there.
I think that's a fair statement. We fairly or unfairly, fans expect the coach to pull a rabbit out of a hat on 4th down. Ooh, you got a list you've been saving, Coach. I know you do. And to run up the middle of the shotgun can't be on that list.
That I think that's what everybody was kind of thinking. But
like that's the best you got?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, to me, like I said, I'm not an X's and O's guy. To me, it's about picking what personnel to use in what situation.
And that's also a lot of
criticism. I think the whole shotgun versus under center thing, I think they cancel each other out because under shotgun you have momentum. You pile right into the line on momentum. If you have a bigger quarterback, that especially matters. So that's, to me, if Burmeister can't generate quite so much power in his shoulder if it's hurt, then you put in Bloomrick, who's bigger anyway, and then you run it behind Lacita Smith and not.
Well, the counter argument to that is you get under center, you submarine their defensive lineman, and your quarterback just bulldozes ahead. That's how they used to do it old school.
It's a freaking yard. It doesn't matter. You should pick it up either way. That's Fuente's quote after the game. He was mad. He was like, "You telling me we can't pick up a freaking yard?" I mean, it's a yard. Look, it doesn't matter what play you call.
Right.
It's a yard.
That's great. I didn't hear that one. Sorry. That's great. He said, "I don't care what we're doing. We should be able to pick up a yard."
Yeah, right. He's right. Yeah.
Well, looking at the first 3 games of the season, I think for many Virginia Tech fans, if you told them you'll be 2-1 with a win over a top 10 North Carolina team, a close loss to West Virginia, and just outside the rankings after 3 weeks, I feel like at the beginning of the season, a lot of people would have taken that, but that doesn't seem like that's the mindset right now.
Yeah, well, it's whenever you start off with a big win, that's the danger you fall into is the expectations go up, right? But I think, I think if you would ask the vast majority of Virginia Tech fans before the season, what would Tech's record be after 3 games? They would have said either 2-1 or 1-2.
Yeah.
And we're 2-1, and Tech has won the game they were favored in, and they're 1-1 in the games that they were underdogs. Yeah. So to me, the bigger issue is the injury that are piling up.
That's another thing. That's another theme that repeats itself. Is you're 3 and 4 games in and you're getting dinged up. So you go back to that Carolina game where Virginia Tech was the aggressor, and I don't even remember anybody limping off the field at any point in that game for Virginia Tech. And the 2 games since then, you've had guys like I think Middle Tennessee put 4 guys on the turf for Virginia Tech. And I complained about this at the beginning of the 2019 season when they went up to play BC. And one dude for BC who was like 5'11", 180 sent 3 Tech guys off the field.
Well, that was great for Middle Tennessee. He got Braxton and James Mitchell.
Yeah, and so
and that one didn't help Braxton's shoulder either.
I doubt it.
Right.
Either.
Yeah, whatever's going on there.
Because that was his throwing shoulder that got stung.
Yes. Looking ahead for Virginia Tech, Next 4 games are at home with a bye week in there. You're 1-0 in the ACC. You've got Pitt, who didn't look great against Western Michigan this week. Syracuse, who seems to be kind of at the bottom of the ACC coming up. So it seems like there still should be a lot of optimism for this team, at least for the next month or so, where you do not have to leave Blacksburg until, late October?
And then you got to leave it a lot.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's like you're 2-1. You're, I don't know, sound like, Beamer used to and say you're 1 block away. But, I mean, that third down play on the goal line, if the block's not blown on the left side of the line, then we're probably sitting here talking about how we're 3-0.
And how awesome it was
Right,
that they
yeah.
came back.
We've beaten Carolina and West Virginia in 2 of our first 3 games. I mean,
and it's no wonder the helmets say grit.
Right. Yeah, you're right, exactly.
Maybe that's why I was mistaking win and loss on the intro.
The miracle in Morgantown Part 2, right? But it's so like there's no I don't have any different feelings about the program today than I did 2 days ago or 3 days ago or whatever. I don't have any different feelings about where the season might or might not go. We've always known we're a team that would have to scrap it out, and the difference between going 7-5 and 9-3 could come down to critical injuries and random events and turnovers and at the wrong time and things like that.
Yeah.
And right now the injuries are going against Tech. I think the random events have maybe evened out. They maybe cost Virginia Tech the West Virginia game with the Tavion touchdown, and they maybe helped win them the game against North Carolina. So we'll see how it goes from here. The one thing is, like, the Coastal Division, I mean, just as soon as you think Pitt looks like a good football team, they lose at home to Western Michigan, right?
Give up 40-some points doing it, or was it 50-some?
Yeah.
It was 44-41.
Wow.
Yeah, Carolina can really score, but they don't really stop anybody either.
Well, and Virginia Tech has the tiebreaker with North Carolina.
Right. Same thing for Virginia. I mean, did North Carolina ever punt the other night? If they did, it was really, really late after I stopped paying attention. So if that's the case, then that's 8 straight quarters of football that UVA hasn't forced a North Carolina punt.
Wow.
I mean, UVA fans are after their offensive coordinator a lot. The guy they ought to be after is their defensive coordinator.
Yeah, they score 39 points, 38, 39?
Yeah, I mean,
that's enough.
That's crazy.
300-some yards passing in the first half.
That should be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's every team has weaknesses. Ultimately, I do think Carolina will prove, because of Sam Howell and the explosiveness of their offense, like, even though they lost that first game to Virginia Tech, like, I would not bet against them winning the Coastal. But
yeah, not at this point.
But at the same time, Virginia Tech is a game up, with the tiebreaker. And there's a familiarity bias. When everybody looks at their own team and they're like, "Oh my God, we're weak here, we're weak there, we stink here. How are we ever going to win any games?" And guess what? The Pitt fans are also saying, "Oh my God, how are we going to win any games?
We've got Kenny Pickett. How can we lose to it? Kenny Pickett's 90 years old and has been playing quarterback here for 15 years. How can we lose to Western Michigan?" Every
single team can nitpick weaknesses on their team. For Carolina, I think it's pure just toughness and not a smash mouth approach to football. For UVA, I just don't think UVA has much talent on defense. For Pitt, they gave up 41 to Western Michigan, and then the week before that they gave up 34 to Tennessee, and Tennessee's not a very good football team in my opinion. So to me, it just seems like Pitt's defense isn't good this year. Miami, I mean, they can just point to the fact that they're Miami, and they're just going to lose football games randomly.
Miami's like a box of chocolates.
They should be 0-3 right now.
Right.
So
Duke is Duke. Duke can only win a football game when Northwestern turns it over 5 times, and it's still only a 7-point game. So there's just everybody's got holes, and you just have to see how it works out.
So here's some interesting things I picked up off of Twitter last night. I'm sorry I don't remember which account it is, but let's see. We're looking at ACC conference leaders in passing. Braxton Burmeister is 10th. That's not a surprise.
Sounds about right.
Derek King is right below him. Let's see. Burmeister had How is this sorted? This is sorted by rating, not yards.
Right. Oh, yeah, he has to be last in yards.
Or it is not. No, I don't know how this is sorted. I'm going to stop talking about
yeah.
It's yards per attempt. Okay, so Braxton Burmeister is 10th in yards per attempt. Derek King is 11th.
I didn't see their game against Alabama or Michigan State, but I watched them play against Appalachian State, and their receivers couldn't do jack against Appalachian State.
And DJ Uiagalelei of Clemson is last in yards per attempt. So, and then there's another cool thing. So so I like to talk about, how many big plays are you making? And 2021 ACC leaders long scrimmage plays, and it's sorted by the number of plays offenses have that are 10 plus yards. Which team is leading the ACC in plays of over 10 yards?
UVA.
I saw this one. Yep.
No, you saw it. UVA. You guys.
I didn't see it. I was just guessing.
UNC is second. Virginia Tech is 13th, and Clemson is last.
Yeah, Clemson's last.
In 3 games, Clemson has 32 plays at 10 plus yards. Tech has 39.
They had less than 300 yards against Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
I mean, how could Clemson possibly do that?
They barely escaped.
Clemson fell to number 9,
That is looking
is
scary.
which is very low for
and quite frankly, I'm not sure. I would feel better maybe about playing Clemson right now than I would West Virginia, because Clemson, they can't move the football.
Yeah.
They just can't do it.
So, Nick, are you watching David Cunningham's Twitter feed?
Yes, they're quite entertaining.
Yes. So how about Fuente on the Hokies inside the 10-yard line? You got that one up?
Yeah, he opened up the press conference, said he rewatched the film, and he said, "Yeah, we stunk."
On offense.
Talking about
Very
red
candid.
zone offense. And then he also talked about Johnsy, and he says he has no idea who's going to play right tackle. He said Clements was hurt last week in practice and did not travel to West Virginia.
So he wasn't even an option. Okay.
No.
Yeah, Clements
So
wasn't
he
there.
has no idea who's going to play this week for that. Waiting to see. They still don't have an injury update on Johnsy.
Okay.
All right.
One thing I want to get to before we get to YouTube questions, we talked a lot about the fans at West Virginia, but from all I've heard, they were a little more hospitable this weekend. Maybe it would have been different if Tech had scored on that last possession.
We got a text from Richie Davis. He was like, "Their fans are awesome. We had a great time. We
Yeah.
should play them all the time." and that's the general consensus we're getting from people on our message boards who went to the game, is that their fans were fine, and there's no reason to not play the game.
So
I mean, look, everybody has a bad moment. Like that was a very emotional time in 2003. We spent. God, when did that start up? The whole expansion process started when
it started in April when
Okay,
Tranghese
came
went
out
to
to
the
the-
New York Post, I think,
Right.
and said they're trying to steal our team.
and it was 2 months of
2.5 months.
2.5 months of just pure agony.
Yeah.
And for most of that 2.5 months, we thought Virginia Tech was going to get left behind in the Big East, and we were going to end up in something like Conference USA. We were terrified about the future of the program.
Yeah. And
So-
we didn't get left, and
West Virginia did.
did.
And so at that point, they were terrified about the future of their program, and they blamed us. And I can understand why they would blame us, especially after Charles Steger came out and said, we would not accept an invitation to the ACC right now, even if offered. And then sure enough, we did.
They're like the old Eddie Murphy line, too bad we can't stay.
Right, and that's why school presidents, that's an example of, that whole thing is probably taught in some PR class somewhere for athletic directors and school presidents. Don't do interviews because you're going to end up saying something like that.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
So John Swofford in the ACC, speaking of class, John Swofford in the ACC gave a master class in how not to expand your conference.
Right.
And he learned from that.
Yeah.
They had these bylaws they had to follow where they had to visit the campuses and things like that. So it was this very, you guys, you weren't there. It was this very public thing that just dragged out for weeks on end. And these days, hey, Texas and Oklahoma are going to the SEC, and 3 days later it's done.
It's done.
Yeah.
You don't hear a thing. And even Swofford became Ninja Swofford after a while, where he would take Pitt and Syracuse and Louisville, and you wouldn't know about it till he was driving away with them in the truck.
Yeah, so like West Virginia back then, I mean, that was a tough situation for everybody. And I was at the Pitt game in 2003, and it was the same thing. Their fans were really bad. But I can't imagine after 2 decades, like they're still in a Power 5 conference. The longer you get away from an event, the more your emotions cool. Like, heck, you even look at message boards like, let's say you lose you lose a football game this week. Our message boards are calmer on Monday than they were on Saturday, right? Because people they've had time to cool down. They're not drinking, which a lot of them are during a game. So sometimes you just need time, and I think plenty of time has gone by on that. And like I said, my last run-ins with West Virginia fan were in Charlotte at a West Virginia bar and in D.C., and they were all great.
Yeah, so maybe it's time to put that to bed. But the thing about a reputation is that you can build a reputation immediately, but it takes a long time to change that. And so, and if you think about West Virginia, yes, they were in air quotes terrified in 2003. Well, 4 years later, they had a chance to play for a national championship, and it was their fault that they didn't. It wasn't anybody else's. I mean, even the referees did all they could to help. So they've been through some stuff, and there's time and perspective there.
Well, they should set up a great rematch next year in Lane Stadium with the Hokies.
And West Virginia hasn't been nearly as good on the road as they have been at home.
All right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's time to dive into some YouTube questions, unless there's more updates from Justin Fuente's presser. Nick, what you got over there?
The main one was from, I hope I'm saying this right, Mr. Shabazz. He said, what is the main weakness with the offense, whether that's quarterback play, wide receivers, or play calling, like you mentioned?
It's the passing game. Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah. Some things are adding up.
And I think... I think we're going to be limited in how much the passing game can improve. I mean, as I've said, I have not seen the progression of our wide receivers since Holman Wiggins left. Yeah. I've not seen our guys improve all that much, which worries me for the future because I do like Payut. I do like Dwayne Lofton and Jalen Jones. But if they improve at the rate of Trey Turner and Tavion Robinson, then we're not going to end up liking them very much. So that somehow needs to be addressed. Whatever the issue is there needs to be addressed, but that's probably an off-season thing rather than in the middle of the season thing. Yeah. The best way for Virginia Tech to improve their offense, yes, I think they need to get better in the passing game, is the best way for them to improve their offense, in my opinion, is by improving the running game, and by improving the running game, it means Burmeister has to keep the ball on the read.
He's a weapon.
And he's taken so much contact anyway that I know you play the percentages and everything like that. No, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't go out there and run him a bunch against Richmond, for goodness sake.
Right.
And maybe not against Syracuse.
Well, he doesn't need to practice running the read option. He already is really good at it.
Right.
So you're right. You can save that.
Yeah. So I think that's the quickest way to get better offensively.
Well, and if Braxton Burmeister is a little bit banged up, maybe hopefully not playing the whole game against Richmond and then a bye week gets you ready for Notre Dame. Maybe he's feeling better that he could pull the read option.
What was the score of the Notre Dame game this past weekend? I know they won.
They won 27-14.
Who did they play?
27-13. Yep.
Who'd they play, Nick?
Purdue.
So they're not blowing the doors off of people.
Yeah.
So
opportunity. There's another opportunity.
Absolutely.
All right.
What else you got over the Nick?
This is the last one. You guys basically answered all the other ones that I've been reading through, but this is a big one right here. What is the deal with the first half and the last two games? Sluggish against Middle Tennessee, and then pretty darn sluggish against West Virginia.
And who asked that question? Do you have it written down?
TKK Cali. Oh,
okay.
Some just username.
It's weird because the North Carolina game, Tech was ready, and I thought Cornelson's very first possession was fantastic. The wheel route, and he really had UNC back on their heels.
He certainly seemed to have energy.
Yeah.
Of course, but how does that work? Like, does it seem like you have energy because you make the plays, or are you making the plays because you have energy?
Well, maybe it gets back to what I said about they're coming at you and throwing downfield, and you're dinking over to the sidelines and running jet sweeps.
Well, that was our first play against UNC though. It was a wide receiver screen.
Well, I didn't like it then.
A wide receiver screen and then a running play. I'm just saying.
I never like it. If Justin Fuente and his staff can't answer that question, how can we?
It's true.
But it is, and we sit here and we say this all the time. We sit here and we watch our own team Well, other teams have that problem too of just not coming out being ready.
Well, like I
sometimes.
said, it's a familiarity bias.
Yeah, exactly. So
I read somebody said something. I don't know this for a fact, but I read it on the boards. You know how we always talk about, Tech doesn't beat any top 10 teams or something like that. And it was some kind of crazy stat about like Auburn only has like one road win over a top 10 team in
40 years or something
insane like that. And you would think Auburn would have done that more often, as
Yeah.
many times as you get a chance to do it in the SEC. But
And having been in 2 national championship
Right.
games in the last couple decades.
Yeah.
So, well, if that's it for YouTube questions over there.
There's one more Fuente quote. He said, "We got our butts whipped at the point of attack."
that's what it looked like. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll comment on that. I think I think Tech's returning offensive linemen haven't played as well as they're capable of playing. I think the Middle Tennessee game, Tech was pretty vanilla, but I also think that disguised to a certain extent that I don't think our guys are playing to their physical capabilities. I think Janzi is, and that's the sad part that they lost Janzi, is he's actually been Tech's highest grading offensive lineman this year. He was their highest grading lineman in his 19 plays or whatever against West Virginia, and overall on the season he's their highest grading offensive lineman. And I don't think Brock Hoffman's been as good. His snaps haven't been as good. And I'm discounting his performance at right tackle because I don't think that was a fair situation to him. But I don't think he's been as good as he was last year. I don't think Luke Tenuta is playing anywhere near as capable as well as he's capable of playing. I think for the most part, Lasita Smith is doing fine, but I think I think the fact that the 2 guys that he are on his left and right that aren't playing as well as they should be, it's making him look worse than he actually is. So they got to get. I don't know if that's the whole reading your press clippings, which I don't guess is accurate anymore because there are no press clippings. Reading about yourself on social media too much.
Reading your Instagram comments.
Or oh my God, well, our whole position group got an NIL deal. Woohoo! And now we can't block anybody.
Nah.
De'Aaron King gets a NIL deal, and now he can't throw the football. I don't know.
He's not earning his money.
DJ Uyunglele in a Dr. Pepper commercial.
And now he's the worst quarterback in the ACC.
In terms of yards per attempt.
In terms of yards per attempt. So, yeah, I think the quickest way to improve the offense is we know that those offensive linemen that I just mentioned are capable of playing
Can play better, yeah.
And we know that Braxton Burmeister is capable of making the right decisions on the read option. So what we don't know is, I think I do know it, but we just haven't seen our receivers progress since 2018, in my opinion. So, I think the likelihood of the light just coming on and our passing game magically getting better and our guys getting separation and things like that, I don't think that's likely. And combine that with a quarterback who's maybe got a banged up throwing shoulder. I just think if those older linemen start playing to their physical capabilities and we unshackle Burmeister a little bit in the read option, I think we have a better chance to improve in the running.
And I think there's another piece to that puzzle. Don't pretend as if James Mitchell is the only tight end that could be productive in the passing game. We've seen some of Gallo in the passing game. I've seen him open and not be thrown to. I've seen him catch some passes. Dulius had a nice play.
Yeah, that was a wheel route. Now, Dulius is a guy that comes to mind. If you remember, Virginia Tech pulled his red shirt briefly in 2017
at BC
as a red zone target.
Yeah,
and in particular, I think they were interested in throwing him the fade because he's a really tall guy. So to me, if you were interested in doing that when he was a true freshman,
mark this moment. Chris Coleman's calling it.
Then that might should be one of your options now.
So after he scores 2 red zone touchdowns
against Richmond,
against Notre Dame, we're going to slice this clip up and say Chris Coleman said this September.
That's
20th.
how we'll start the podcast. We're just going to throw that on to start.
Right.
Give him his congratulations.
I hope it comes to that.
Right.
All right. So, any closing thoughts from you guys before we get out of here? I think we've covered pretty much everything from the West Virginia game.
Yeah. Yep. I covered it. So for my article today, I'm going to look at Tech's red zone statistics from the last few years, and sort them like when they're in the when they're in the red zone, how often do they score touchdowns? How often do they score field goals? Where did that rank? and I don't know what I'm going to find. I don't have an agenda, but I do think that Tech's red zone performance just hasn't been that bad. You know,
it's been bad this year, but in general,
exactly in the past.
In general, it hasn't been a recurring problem across.
Right, yeah.
So
I'm going to work on that for my article today. And it's my Monday articles are getting in some days they're hard. Like I'm not really sure what all I'm going to write about today. I think Chris's article yesterday was outstanding, and I'll see what angles I can find, but I definitely know I'm going to write about that.
Chris, anything else coming up the next couple of days on Tech Sideline?
Our normal stuff, man. Well, I guess
stuff.
Brandon Patterson will send me an article.
Our normal awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yep. Preview won't be as long this week because we don't know as much about Richmond.
Yeah. And I always like to mention Jack Brizendine behind the scenes. He'll have Tech Talk Live notes.
So now that the basketball schedule is out, the wrestling schedule generally follows pretty quickly. So Jack, keep your eyes peeled for that and get ready to write about the wrestling schedule.
Yes. Basketball schedule came out quickly before we get out of here.
So they're going on the road to UNC and Duke over Christmas.
Staggering Christmas.
Yeah, it's a favorable schedule from the standpoint that I don't think UNC, Duke, or UVA is coming during Christmas break like they usually do.
Well, Tech has...
We do have 3 home games while students are gone.
But the week in February that stood out to me was, I believe it's Syracuse, UVA, UNC, all in Castle within 8 days of each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that could be a big week.
Yeah, that could be. There's a big Monday against UVA, right?
I believe,
on Valentine's Day.
The 14th, yes.
Yeah, it's on Valentine's Day.
So I think it's Syracuse Saturday, UVA Monday, and then UNC the next Saturday.
20 ACC games, and then an upgraded non-conference schedule.
Yes.
There is going to be a lot of very, very competitive games this season.
Preseason NIT, believe Tech will face Memphis.
And who's going to preseason top 10 because of
return
those
of
two guys
Nolly.
they signed. Yeah.
Yes, Landers Nolly's revenge game.
And they're recruiting well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And we also can't slip by without mentioning Patrick Wessler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech getting
7 feet tall, 250 pounds.
I believe David Cunningham tweeted however long it's been 4 7-foot players on Virginia Tech's roster in 2 decades or something like that.
List of Virginia Tech players 7'0" or taller since joining the ACC. Robert Crammed, who really wasn't your big bulky center.
I don't even know, was he listed at 7 feet when he got to Tech or just when he signed?
I don't know that exactly.
I think he was listed at 7 feet at Tech, but I don't know.
Satchel Pierce, who Buzz brought Satchel with him from Marquette, right?
That's hilarious.
He was on that first Buzz Williams
team.
He
was on that first recruiting class. He decommitted in the same class as Ahmed Hill. It was hilarious one time at a post-game press conference. He was asked about Satchel Pierce, and Satchel wasn't developing. Satchel just wasn't very good. But Buzz believed in him, thought he was developable. And Buzz's wife would always come to the press conferences. And Buzz goes, "Man, my wife tells me all the time that Satchel Pierce isn't any good." And she was so embarrassed, but she was right.
She was right. It's true. Johnny Hamilton, who later transferred out.
Well, yeah, he went to like UT San Antonio. Well, he had a good career there, and he actually plays professionally overseas.
Oh, good. Yeah. And then the fourth is Patrick Wessler from 2022. So that Crammed was 04 to 07, Pierce was 14 to 16, Hamilton was 15 to 17, and then Wessler's 2022. 7'0", 250, is that right?
I saw 235 on 247, but who knows when the last time these guys
we've got him listed as 235. Yeah.
But I mean, whatever.
Well, in the middle of football season, sometimes that stuff can get lost between the cracks, but glad we mentioned it. Schedule came out for men's basketball for ACC games, and then Patrick Wessler commits to the Hokies as well. I believe that's going to do it for episode 192 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. I want to thank Will Stewart across the way. You can find him at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter, our founder and general manager. To my left, Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist. You can find him at Chris Coleman TSL. Behind the scenes, always a great job for Malcolm Stewart, the best producer in the land. Nick Brown over here keeping us up to date on Justin Fuente's press conference, as well as YouTube questions. And I'm Jake Lyman, your host. That'll do it for episode 192 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by the Southeast Regional Training Center. We're going to get out of here, but we'll be back later on this week to preview Richmond as the Hokies look to bounce back from their loss to West Virginia. We hope you have a great start to your week, Hokies fans. We'll see you next time.